All right, welcome back. I hope you had some good time to kind of stretch, step away from your desk. I know it's around lunchtime here in Chicago, so if you're also in the same time zone, getting some lunch. And with that, we're going to hop right in to Sarah's talk about smart devices, IoT vulnerabilities, and designing for security. If you have any questions that come up during that, feel free to pop into the channel that we have for this talk that you can see at the bottom of the screen. And with that, let's kick it off.
This message is transmitted at the request of the United States Office of Civil Defense at 3:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, NORAD detected a long-range nuclear.
Good afternoon. I would first like to start by thanking the organizers of Roboto for having me speak today. The title of my talk is Smart Devices Gone Rogue, IoT Vulnerabilities and Designing for Security. And no, this is not a test. You could follow me at nomad_hacker. My name is Sarah Kraynick, and I hope you enjoy. So who am I? I always think it's important to know who you're listening to. Since you're taking the time out of your day to listen to this talk, I think I owe that to you. So I've been in tech professionally almost 15 years. Throughout that time, I've been in security, development, testing of various kinds, including security, pen testing, red teaming. I've been in starting startups. I've been working in the back end, all across the spectrum. As a kid, I also was involved with technology through my work with electronics and circuitry. Outside of my professional work, I contribute to a lot of open source projects. I have 2 on the go right now. If you want to ask me about that, I can tell you about it later. Besides my tech work, my passions lie in the ring, specifically Muay Thai. It's my stress relief, it's my physical fitness, and it's something I love to do. Put on the gloves, put on the pads, and yeah, beat somebody up for points. It sounds fun. It's great fun, great fitness. So that's a little bit about me. Let's get to the topic at hand. Some IoT stats. The IoT device market is anticipated to reach $1.1 trillion by 2026. 25 billion IoT devices by 2021. 3.5 billion cellular IoT connections. 152,200 IoT devices per minute are going to be connected by 2025. So that's nearly 80 billion devices are forecast to be connected annually. That is a massive amount. Now for some IoT stats concerning vulnerabilities. IoT devices are typically attacked within 5 minutes of being connected. We'll get to why and how in a second. 75% of infected devices in IoT attacks are routers. Fewer than 20% of risk professionals can identify a majority of their organization's IoT devices. That's quite frightening. That's 80% that companies do not know are connected or being used within their organizations. More than 90% of the 2018 IoT attacks exploited the Telnet protocol, up from 50% in 2017. The reason? Many IoT devices are older types of equipment that don't get replaced or updated rapidly. This is actually one of the biggest concerns in IoT security. 90% of all IoT devices traffic is unencrypted, which is quite frightening. 50% of IoT devices are vulnerable to medium or high severity attacks, making IoT the low-hanging fruit for attackers.
Right now we have a CBS 4 Health alert to tell you about. Almost 500,000 people in the U.S. must update their pacemakers that are vulnerable to being hacked. The Food and Drug Administration announced a recall of implantable pacemakers by Abbott Laboratories. According to the FDA, the pacemakers could be compromised by hackers. The flaws would potentially allow hackers to change the settings or even turn off the pacemakers. Patients with the devices embedded in their chest will require a trip to the hospital to make the fix.
Before we move on, I think it's critical to talk about some past attacks. So these are not obviously all of them, but just some highlights, some ones that might be noteworthy and a little bit crucial to some of us. And so here we go. Owlet Wi-Fi heart monitor, baby heart monitor. Yeah, so Owlet had a lot of issues actually, not just with their heart monitors, but actually a lot of their cameras. And yeah, hackers were able to get in. In the particular case I found was more about the encryption between the Ad-hoc network that it created. Along those lines, we have the TRENDnet webcam hack. We will actually I'll do a demonstration a little bit how easy this is actually to do. But TRENDnet actually had a problem that their default settings weren't allowing people to. Basically, there was no password, and there was no settings for that. So people would set it up, there would be no password, people were able to get on, and yeah, so they updated the firmware. Yeah, not good. Another one, the DDoS on thermostats in Finland. So a DDoS attack is a distributed denial of service attack. A denial of service attack is when you basically fire enough requests to a server that you basically shut it down for a while so no other people can actually access your server. So often it's a temporary thing that can actually take down a server permanently until a system administrator can come in and reset everything. A distributed one is when you use a bunch of slaves or bots, so controlled computers that you have taken over to actually fire all those requests. If you've ever done performance testing, that's essentially what you're doing, except obviously legal. So they're actually able to basically shut off the system. So people in Finland, and Finland's quite a cool place, like here up in Canada, and yeah, people froze for quite a while until they were able to reset everything. On October 12, 2016, a massive distributed denial of service attack left much of the internet inaccessible on the US East Coast. The attack, which authorities initially feared was work of a hostile nation state, was in fact the work of the Mirai Botnet. Botnets, as a note, often are computer systems, like home computer systems or office computer systems. But in this case, a lot of IoT devices are actually utilized, and that's what makes it quite unique. And it scanned big blocks of the internet for open telnet ports, and then attempted to log in using 61 username password combos that are frequently used in default for these devices and never changed. So in this way, it was able to amass an army of compromised closed-circuit TV cameras and routers ready to do its bidding. So yeah, it's quite an interesting one because instead of, like I said, in using all these computers in offices or at homes and servers, it was using IoT devices. So that's why it's quite noteworthy. So I just wanted to take the time to explain a little bit about the demonstrations. The first one is actually just, look, they're all both looking just for devices that have basically open ports, open access, so there's no security on them. The first one, of course, is cameras, and these particular devices either don't have passwords or they come with a default password that's known and nobody changes them. This is a huge problem in IoT. So when we look at these issues, we see this across the board. And so the second one is very similar. We're just looking for the port for that particular device. In this case, 9100, which is generally a port for printers. So that's what we're looking for. We look for the open ports, boom, bam, we connect to a random IP and we get access to the device. Both these demonstrations are not technically hacking because we're not exploiting anything. We're just simply looking up devices. These two tools, the first tool is actually Metasploit, the second one is Showdown. The printer was actually done on a tool called Showdown I, which is one abstraction layer above both Metasploit and Showdown, which is quite scary because it lowers the bar to entry to actually exploit devices. So let's move on to Android things, since that's why we're here at a mobile conference and you have me speaking about security and IoT. All right, Android things. Android things came out in 2017. It was meant as a way for Google to be a part of the IoT revolution. Well, it didn't quite turn out that way, but some interesting things. I got involved with it in 2017 when I was involved with some embedded systems and sensor networking, in particular with Bluetooth. And I was doing some stuff with circuitries and GPIO. So that's how I got involved with it. And of course, I married that with my security background. All right, so about Android security, here we go. The needs to know. It was actually, Android Things was created to address a lot of security issues in IoT. So security issues like getting updates to devices, password issues, and other things. It was meant to control IoT and have a central place to administer IoT devices. Because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of organizations don't even know how many devices they have. So this was a potential way to help with some of those issues. So it's a stripped down version of Android. You don't need all that power, right? So it's to permit developers to build smart devices using Android API, which is critical because you don't want to create you don't want to have to train people on yet a new language, a new platform. You could take Android developers and put them on embedded. So as I mentioned, it was also one of the issues is to update IoT devices. So that's where Google got involved and said, no, we're going to force updates on people. And this is how we can address some of the security issues. Well, that creates issues in itself and control over who has control over the device, which of course as developers, we'd like control over everything. So this created some issues. It runs on Pi 3, which is the one I worked with when I developed my own project, and Pico. So unfortunately, it's not running on very many devices at this moment, mostly speakers and smart displays. One of the reasons is because, as the next point says, it's too complex for a lot of IoT devices. IoT is supposed to be very simple, right? One device, one action. So it turns on and off a light, turns the light a different color, maybe have a doorbell. It's not meant as a complex calculation thing, right? It's just meant to do something. Take a sensor, manipulate some data, and display something. That even displays too much. Anyways, moving on. So there's two types of Android Things apps. One's without display, so-called headless, and those with displays. Traditionally, IoT would be headless because you don't need a display, right? You don't need to see numbers when you turn off and on a light, right? You connect your wires to the GPIO, you turn it off and on, send a signal, and boom, bam, you have an IoT sort of system set up. So just quickly, I know this is a very big topic and it could be a whole talk in itself. It's this idea of security versus usability. You can have something that's super secure and super usable. Those things often, and I don't think ever, will be together. Because if you have something super secure, you have to put in 3 passwords, turn around, knock 3 times, give a super secret password, and on it goes. Super usable, you don't need a password, you can use biometric, you can use whatever. But it doesn't mean it'll be secure. So think about this when you're designing your system. Think about your users. Who is going to use this app? What are their needs? What is the cost to your organization if you have a breach or any kind of security issues? And this is where security professionals and information security professionals come in useful. Again, I can go on and on about this topic, but I think I'll leave it there. So there are some specific security concerns. Again, I'm not going to read through this list, but it's worthwhile to go over, and there's some really scary things. I will clear up one point: home invasions. Because it's something, it's like people, what is that? Home invasions is when all these devices come into the home, and we're not actually aware that they're there and can pose significant risk to our privacy and security. The second list is OWASP. OWASP is an amazing project called the Open Web Application Security Project. It's run by a bunch of amazing people. Go and check them out. I only have a few seconds left, so I just wanted to say thank you to the organizers yet again. Thank you to all you listeners. You can find me on Twitter at nomad_hacker. You can find me on GitHub at skraynick. And since this talk is half as long as it was originally supposed to be, I have a bunch of materials I'm going to release on secure coding, security design, and I'll produce a little video on those topics, and whatever materials I have left over, I will release to the appropriate locations. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening again. Bye!
All right. Thank you so much for that. That is all very important things. Be sure to drop your questions in the Slack channel where Sarah's talk. There aren't any there yet. So in the meantime, Sarah, did you have anything else you'd want to say?
Not really. Thanks for listening. I did want to mention again that I'm going to be releasing a bunch of material, so stay tuned. Because the talk, of course, is half as long as it was used to or was supposed to. So do stay tuned.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. We did have one question come in when we were talking, and that is, what's your top thing developers should consider when working with IoT? There are lots of excellent food for thoughts here. And then thanks. So do you have any top tips that you would recommend?
Don't use a default password for the same default password for everything, because a lot of devices ship with the same password. So a lot of routers are now changing this. It used to be like admin or admin password or something like this. Change those up. So if you ship it and somebody doesn't want to do anything with the device, they can connect it and not have to worry too much about actually changing a password. You got to think about that you're dealing with people who are 60 and above or 50 and above, never worked with a computer. They wanted their doorbell. They don't want to have to go in there and change all the settings from the start.
Yeah, for sure. That is a great tip. With that, we will move on to a little bit of break before our next talk in about 8 minutes. Again, thank you so much, Sarah. And if anyone watching has any more questions, feel free to drop them in the channel. Feel free to take these minutes to go visit our expos. We have some great people over there. Fill your drink, whatever you need to do, and we'll see you back here in a couple minutes. Thanks.